السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدًا عبده ورسوله. Firstly, we like to apologize for the slight delay due to some signal problems. We apologize to the sisters for the second TV if it's not on. But inshallah ta'ala, the main one is the PowerPoint to follow, inshallah ta'ala. So we continue, inshallah ta'ala, with our program, A Sip of Knowledge, in which we are giving a brief or a semi-intensive exposure to some of the sciences of Islam. And as we know, that today, inshallah ta'ala, we'll be covering slightly on the topic of the Arabic language. And this class is not a class on the Arabic language as in learning a second language. That's not the intent of this class, as some people might be wondering. How is it we're going to teach Arabic language in 1 hour, 1.5 hours, or 2 hours, depending on how long we go, inshallah ta'ala. But the intent of this class is to give a brief introduction to the language. As a language, some of the characteristics of the language, and a brief introduction to this science of the Arabic language and how it developed through the early stage of Islam as a field of studies. As a field of study. As we know, in the beginning of Islam, during the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and during the time of the companions after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the early stage during the Khilafah of Umar radiallahu anhu all the way to Ali radiallahu anhu, right? All the way to Ali, we are excluding Ali. So Umar, during the time, from the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, before the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to Abu Bakr, Umar, and Uthman. During all this time, there were no Arabic grammar class, right? There were no class for Arabic grammar and studying Arabic as a second language the way we know it today. Because during those times, the Arabs, they were speaking Arabic naturally. They were speaking Arabic naturally. They had no need to study the Arabic language. They had no need to study the Arabic language. They were speaking it gradually. So we want to cover some of some of these issues, inshallah ta'ala, in this class. That is the intent of this class as a whole. And as we are accustomed to, some of the objective of this presentation, as we say, is not intent to learn the language as a language, but to be a means of motivation to learn the language and study the Arabic language, have an awareness of some of the sciences surrounding the Arabic language, have a clue about the history of the Arabic grammar and some of its scholars. So this is the main intent of this class, bi'idhnillah. First, we start by mentioning as a whole some of the sciences pertaining to the Arabic language as a whole. When you study the Arabic language, you can study it from different aspects. Or the scholars of the Arabic language, they break up the studies of the Arabic language into different aspects, and they break it up generally into 6 aspects, 6 different fields of the Arabic language that you can study. The first of those fields is the ilm fiqh al-lugha. Ilm fiqh al-lugha, which they translate as philology, and you will know better how to pronounce those words, inshallah. And then you have the ilm al-aswat, or the phonetics, ilm al-sarf, morphology, ilm al-balagha, the art of eloquence or rhetoric, ilm al-nahu, grammar, and ilm al-arud, prosody. Now, ilm fiqh al-lugha, generally, when you talk about the ilm of fiqh al-lugha, fiqh, as we know, means understanding, right? This can generally include everything in the Arabic language. Everything in the Arabic language goes back to understanding the Arabic language. But some of the scholars, when they say fiqh al-lugha, they're referring to specifically the understanding of how the Arabic language works. Also, they refer to the history and the structure of the Arabic language and properties of the Arabic language. So if, for example, in grammar, you will study when to put a fatha, when to put a dhamma, kasra, and so on. Right? The fiqh of that will be the understanding of the meaning. Right? Structure and the form of the Arabic words. The shape of the words. And during this presentation, we will touch a little on 3 of these topics. We will touch a little on sarf. We will explain more when we come to that. We will touch a little on balagha, the art of eloquence, the art of effective and persuasive speaking or writing techniques. And we will touch a little on grammar and history relating to grammar. The history part is more with the fiqh of the language, the ilm fiqh al-lugha, or the philology. And then you have ilm al-arud. Now, ilm al-arud, we put there the patterns and the rhythm and the songs used in poetry. Now, ilm al-arud, as we know, one of the pride of the Arabs and the Arabic language is their poetry. And they have a field where you study the structure of these poetry. Khalil ibn Ahmad, as we will come across him inshallah, he came about with this science, the science of arud, where you have scales. Scales in order to know whether or not your poem is upright, is correct. Because it's not like the English poetry where you don't really need to match each side or each line to each other. The Arabic language, when you are reciting a poem or writing a poem, there is scales. You have to stick within a scale. The entire poetry has to be within a scale. For example, you have the famous poem of Al-Farazdaq, where he was praising Zayn al-Abidin. In the famous story of Hisham ibn Abdul Malik, Hisham ibn Abdul Malik, who later on became a Khalifa, but during the time of his father, when his father was a Khalifa, he was the Amir. He wasn't the Khalifa, and he was making Hajj. And in this story, you see also the eloquence of the Arabs and their ability to be, what you call it, without preparation, to prepare a poem or to give a poem, recite a poem without preparation. So Hisham ibn Abdul Malik, he was making Hajj or Umrah, and he wanted to touch the black stone, but they were not allowing him. You know, the normal crowd and so at the black stone. But when Zayn al-Abidin, the great-grandson of the Prophet ﷺ, came to touch the black stone, everyone made way and allowed him to touch the black stone every time he reached around. See, he became jealous. And he just make a statement like, who is that? Like, who is that? There is somebody unknown. Nobody, who is that man? That everybody, they're just making way for someone unknown, someone who doesn't have any significance. Right? And it happened that with him in his company was Al-Farazdaq, who was one of the poets of that time. So Al-Farazdaq, right away, when he heard that, out of jealousy for the great-grandson of the Prophet ﷺ and in defense for him, he says, هَذَا الَّذِي تَعْرِفُ الْبَطْحَاءُ وَطْعَتَهُ وَالْبَيْتُ يَعْرِفُهُ وَالْحِلُّ وَالْحَرَمُ. Right away, he started to shoot out a poem defending Zayn al-Abidin. Right? And some of what came, هذا الذي تعرف البطحاء وطعته والبيت يعرفه والحل والحرم هذا ابن خير عباد الله كلهم هذا التقي النقي الطاهر العلم. Right? And from amongst what he said, ما قال لا قط إلا في تشهده لولا التشهد كانت لاءه نعم. And in this poem, not only you see the language and the beauty of the language, but you see the thinking of the poet. So the structure here, when you study arud, you study the structure of the poet, the poem. And in this poem is what you call the structure of the basit structure. There's a specific structure, and we will explain briefly. In, like, for example, the basit structure, they said the name of the structure is mustaf'ilun fa'ilun mustaf'ilun fa'il. Fa'ilu. Right? Now, what is the meaning of that? When you say the structure has to be mustaf'ilun fa'ilun, mustaf'ilun fa'ilu, meaning you see mus is what? A haraka. Haraka means either dhamma, fatha, kasra. So you have mus, right? Haraka, sukun. And then taf, haraka, sukun, haraka, lun, then another haraka, then a sukun. So the structure of your poem has to be like this throughout. You have to have a haraka, sukun, and a like of that. So imagine the brain power that you need to have to shoot out a poetry and keep it within a structure. You can't just use any words or you're going to fall out of the structure. You're going to break the poem, as they say. Right? And not only that, and remember, when you study these things and the eloquence and the what you call it, the richness of the Arabic language, then you more appreciate the challenge of the Quran. Now remember, they have the skill to do that. Give you an entire poem, right? And structure it. You have a systematic structure in each line, each bite, as they call it, each phrase. And then the meaning also, everything harmonized. For example, he say praising him, right? And look how he think. Look how he think. He said, "Ma qala la qat illa fi tashahudihi." Right? He's praising him to say that he always say yes. Anytime somebody asks for something, he say yes. And then he say he never say no. And then there is one spot that he will definitely have to say no. What is that? La ilaha illallah. There is no God except Allah. That's why he put it in. He said he never said no except in the tashahud. Now look how the thinking of the Arab. And remember, this here is a poet who came after Islam, meaning after the Prophet ﷺ, right? After the companions. So imagine if this is his skill. Imagine the skills of the Arabs in the time of the Prophet ﷺ. And so you appreciate when the Quran challenged them and they weren't able to bring it, you realize. The Western people and the English speaker, they read the Quran, they won't see that it's a challenge. They won't see the miracle in the Quran because they don't understand the Arabic language and the structure of the Arabic language. So by understanding the structure of the Arabic language and understanding the classical Arabic language and how it works, then you understand how this challenge was a challenge for them and how this Quran, it mesmerized them. And they accepted Islam just because of the structure of the Quran. So that is in brief with regards to the ilm al-arud, or the prosody. You study the structure of poetry. And there's a misconception. This here is not really to make you a poet. There's other steps, right? The main purpose of this is to make sure that your poetry is in line with its structure. That is one. And if you come across a poem, you will know whether that poem, maybe it's missing something, or whether it's right or it's not right. Because if it doesn't fall into any of the poetic structure, that means something is missing from the poem. And then you have the knowledge of the Arabic grammar, the study of the Arabic grammar. Now note what the defined grammar is, right? This defined grammar is the study of the last letter of a word regarding its vowel changing in different state and usage. For example, Muhammadun ja'a, right? Muhammadun ja'a. Then you say, Ra'aytu Muhammadan. I saw Muhammad. Muhammadun ja'a, Muhammad came. Ra'aytu Muhammadan. Muhammad, I saw Muhammad. Salamtu ala Muhammadin. I give salam to Muhammad. You notice staying from dun, dan, din, change. Depends on its state. Grammar That is what is study, these changes, and why it changes and when it changes. Right? Not necessary the meaning too much of these changes. You will have to do that, yes, but that is not the focus of the Arabic grammar. Right? And we will mention something with regards to misconception, why people are finding the Arabic grammar difficult for themselves. And then you have the ilm al-balagha. Now, ilm al-balagha, after knowing how to speak, is like in the Caribbean you study English B, right? English B, English A with regards to what? With the ruling of the language, how to speak generally, right? English B, how to beautify your speech, right? Use figure of speech. You can say Muhammad Ja'a, or you can say Ja'a Muhammad, right? But when is it you say which one, either one of them? That is where you study in Balagha. When do you say Muhammad Ja'a, and when you say Ja'a Muhammad, or when it's better to use which one of them? That is what you do in Balagha. And when we reach that topic, remind me inshallah ta'ala, and I will give an example of when it's better to say Ja'a Muhammad and Muhammad Ja'a. Right? And give an example as when it is better, when we reach that inshallah ta'ala. Okay, so a brief peek at some of these sciences. The first one, we're going to study a little about the Arabic grammar. And before we get into the Arabic grammar, a brief history of the Arabic grammar. Now, this historical part has to do with fiqh al-lugha. The historical part has to do with fiqh al-lugha, or fiqhul lughati. Now, the brief history. A brief history on the fiqh of the lugha. Now, we said what is fiqh al-lugha. One of the things you deal with, the brief history of the Arabic language, which is dealt under fiqh al-lugha. Let me get some. Now, as we mentioned, in the early stage of Islam, the Arabic was not studied in this fashion, in the early stage of Islam. Now, why is it? What was the reason for them to start developing the Arabic language? To put guidelines for the Arabic language. We mentioned generally the reason for development, the spread of grammatical mistakes among Muslims after the expansion of the Muslim empire. We mentioned it generally, the spread of grammatical mistakes among the Muslim after the expansion of the Muslim empire. Now, as we know, after the Muslims, Islam started to spread out of the Arab world, out of the Jazira al-Arabiya. You have non-Arabs start to pour into Islam. So there's a great need for communication between the two. And naturally, as it will happen with any language, you have a Spanish person, right, or an English speaker speaking with Spanish. In his vocabulary, you're going to mix up everything, right? He's going to speak Spanglish to make you understand, as they say. So similarly with the Arabs, now you had a crowd of non-Arabs pouring into Islam. And not just those who are pouring into Islam, but the Muslims now, they're dealing with a lot of non-Arabs. So even the non-Muslims among them, they had a need to communicate with the Muslim world, right? So now when you are speaking a language you don't know and you haven't experienced it properly, you're naturally going to make mistake. And then if you have people who are learning from you, they're going to learn your mistakes, right? For example, if you go to Saudi Arabia, you find the Pakistanis and the Bangladeshis and the Indians who are there working. They are speaking the local Amia fluently, right? Just by listening and interacting. No school, no Jamia, no Mahad, nothing, right? They're speaking the local language fluently. Now, if the Arabs, the Saudis, were speaking to them in Fusha, they will naturally learn the Fusha in a general term. They will be able to speak in Fusha, but they're not speaking with them in Fusha. So that is how the people are learning, right? Just on what you're hearing. There is no book work. So in the beginning of this era, you got a lot of mistakes start to fall into the Muslims with regards to the Quran and with regards to the general speech. Among those mistakes, it was mentioned either in the time of Umar radiallahu an or in the time of Ali radiallahu an, that a man, he was teaching the Quran or reciting the Quran, and he was reading from Surah Tawbah. And he read, Inna Allaha bari'um minal mushrikina wa rasulihi. He read, indeed, Allah is free from the disbelievers and His Prophet. Now, and His Prophet what? What is the meaning? The verse stop. And His Prophet. Meaning, Allah is free from the disbelievers and His Prophet is free from the disbelievers also. That is supposed to be the meaning. But if you read the word, Inna Allaha bari'um minal mushrikina wa rasulihi, it means Allah is free from the disbelievers and Allah is free from His Prophet. So the Bedouin man, he said, did Allah say this? And the person who was reciting said, yes, Allah said this. So he said, and I'm free from who Allah free Himself from. So they took him to the Khalifa. And it was said it was Umar, it was said it was Ali. Right? So then, when he explained why is it he free himself, they corrected him and said, no, what the verse said, Inna Allah bari'um minal mushrikina wa rasuluhu. Allah is free from the disbelievers and His messenger is free from the disbelievers. And then he said, I free myself from those whom Allah and His Prophet free themselves. Because Bedouin, they were like this. Straight up, right? There's no metaphor, and so you tell them something, that is it. So the Khalifa, if it was Umar or Ali radiallahu anh, they made a rule that only those who understand the Arabic language should be teaching the Quran. And then you had instances where people were generally making mistake. And we will come to this person here, Abul Aswad ad-Duali. Abul Aswad ad-Duali that we have on the screen on the founder, right? Abul Aswad ad-Duali, he born before Jahiliyyah. He born before the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he accepted Islam, but he never met the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he's considered a tabi'in because he never met the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or what some they call him also mukhadaramin. And this word mukhadaram, it has various meaning. One of the meaning is someone who accepted Islam during the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam but never met him. So he's not considered a companion, right? So he was among them, but he lived in a time he was a close companion of Ali radiallahu anhu. He was a close companion of who? Ali radiallahu anhu. So he was with his daughter, and his daughter tell him, Ma ajmalus sama. Ma ajmalus sama. Meaning, what is the most beautiful of the sky? So he said, Nujumuha. It's stars. She said, that is not what I meant. What I meant, I want to say how beautiful is the sky. She's amazed at the beauty of the sky. So he told her, if you want to be amazed, you got to say, Ma ajmalas sama. Right? With a fatha on the ajmal. Ma ajmalas sama. How beautiful is the sky. But if you say, Ma ajmalus sama, you're saying, what is the most beautiful part of the sky? See the difference, right? The difference. She knows what she wants to say. She structured the sentence right, but that vowel. That's why we say in the beginning, what was the intent of the Arabic grammar? Of Nahu, study that vowel at the end. Not the front part of the word, the middle of the end. Right? So he went to Ali radiallahu an, and he told Ali that they need to put rules and guidelines for this, so people can straighten their language. And these are people who are speaking Arabic. Right? They learn the Arabic, they are speaking, they are conversing, but because of that influence, they are making mistakes that is changing the Arabic language. And just to note, these mistakes, they existed before. Even in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, in the time of the early companions, Umar radiallahu anh, they existed. But it never called for the need of setting foundation. Because naturally, if you migrate to the Arab land, you're going to make mistakes here and there until it's straightened. But the need for books and the need for guidelines to be written down did not exist. Right? Everyone, you had Salman al-Farisi, right, who came from Furs. Right? He was speaking the Arabic language fluently, no mistake and everything. Right? And who was the father of the Arabs? Ismail alayhi salam. Right? And Ismail, the scholars, they said he's the first one who mastered the language of another people and forget the language of his own father. Right? Okay, he wasn't speaking the language of Ibrahim alayhi salam, and he mastered the language of the Jurhum tribe. They were the Arabs who came and visit Hajara when she was there, when they asked her permission to share with the water, and she gave them permission except that she's the owner of it. And so he married from that tribe, and that was an Arab tribe. And he learned their language and he mastered it more than them. So he was the father of the Arabs. So in the early stage, those mistakes that were happening, the natural mistake, it didn't call for steps to be taken. But now in the time of Ali, right, and this most of the scholars, they said it was he was the one who initiated this step. So Ali radiallahu an, he told Abu al-Aswad ad-Duwali, he guided him to form principles in order to guide the people to speak the Arabic language properly. Remember the intention, and the reason I'm going to mention why I'm mentioning this. The intention of grammar is what? To straighten the language, not to teach them it as a foreign language. When it was set, right? The intention was to straighten the language. So Ali radiallahu an, he was actually the founder of Arabic grammar. How is that? Ali radiallahu an, he wrote on a piece of paper al-ism, that the word al-kalima fi al-lughat al-arabiyya imma ism, harf or fi'l. That the word in the Arabic language is either a ism, a noun, a harf, a particle, like when you have conjunctions and those things, in and so. It's either a ism, a harf, or a fi'l, or a verb. It's either a noun, a verb, or a particle. When he looked into the Arabic language, he see that the word, it doesn't fall out of these three categories. So he told Abu al-Aswad ad-Duwali, he gave him this paper, and he tell him under these guidelines or the likes of this, form or develop principles in order for the people to be guided. And we will study the actual wording that he said, inshallah, soon. So he was actually the founder, the original founder who laid the grammar. So where did they get this word nahu from? Now we said in the time when Ali radiallahu anh, he wrote that a word is either a noun, verb, or particle. When he wrote that on the paper and tell Abu al-Aswad to use this as a guideline, he told him, Unhu nahwa hadha. Unhu nahwa hadha. Now, know the word unhu from nahu, right? Nahwa hadha. Meaning, tread this way. Meaning, the same way how I'm laying foundation and general principles, follow the same path to form principles and guidelines so the people can straighten their tongue. Unhu literally means head this towards this direction. Unhu, nahwa, the direction, hadha, this direction. So that they and then later on, when Abu al-Aswad ad-Du'ali went back to Ali radiallahu an and showed him what he developed and some of the principles, Ali radiallahu an, he said, Ma ahsana hadha nahu alladhi nahawt. He said, how good, how excellent is this way you have treaded, meaning to show the people the principles of the Arabic language. So that's where the scholars afterwards, they choose this word to refer to Arabic grammar, nahu. Nahu literally means what? The direction you got to take and tread in order to straighten your tongue and make sure you're speaking properly the Arabic language. So that's briefly with regards to the early stage of the development of the Arabic language. Excuse me. Now the next thing we will cover briefly is some of the stages. And we will not go through everything that you're seeing on the slide. As we say, we're going to make that available to those who want extra information. But briefly, the different stage now that this language went through until you have these here, the books of the grammar in detail, all the different chapters of Arabic grammar, mubtada and khabar and so on, fa'il and fi'il, maf'ulun bihi and all of those things. So as we said, the initial stage, where they call the stage of our marhalatul wada', the stage of laying the foundation, and that starts with Ali radiyallahu an, and that starts in Basra, Iraq, where Ali radiyallahu an he was stationed. And one of the main scholar of that time was Abu al-Aswad ad-Du'ali, and we said he born before the mission of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, 16 years, before the hijrah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, 16 years before the hijrah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which is also before 3 years before the bi'tha of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, 16 years before the hijrah, which is going to be 3 years before the bi'tha. The bi'tha is when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam received revelation at the age of 40. So hijrah means migration, and bi'tha means what? When revelation first came. So, but he never met the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and during this stage is where they first start to lay the foundations of the Arabic grammar, as we mentioned. And also they were busy collecting evidences also during this stage, collecting evidence. Because now, remember, you have to follow the pattern of the Arabic language. So what you got to do? If you want to follow the pattern of something, you have to gather a lot of examples. So they were gathering the poems and so on. And this was the initial stage of laying the foundation of the Arabic language. And then after that, you have the stage of development. Now, those names that I put in yellow, if it's showing yellow in the screen, inshallah. Those names, if you don't have to remember all the names, but remember the names that I have underlined in yellow. So we said in this stage here, Basra. In the first stage, Basra is where that first stage took place. Now, generally, the Arabic language, there's two main schools of thought. The school of thought of Basra and the school of thought of Kufa. And the majority of the grammar that we are studying is from the school of thought of Basra. A lot of it has to do with expression, what you call this and what you call that. Some of it has to do with how they deal with evidence. For example, in the school of thought of Basra, they are very strict with regards to what they take as evidence. If there is Arabic sects and so who have a language that is very rare, they will not build their principles upon it. But the school of thought of Kufa, they will build the principles upon all of the Arab sect, whether they are strange or they are not strange, whether they are famous or not. But during the second stage of development, remember we said the first stage of development, only Basra was dealing with that. During the second stage of development, this is where Kufa starts to get involved. Kufa starts to get involved, and both of them, they are cities in Iraq. And one of the main scholars of this time was Al-Khalil ibn Ahmad al-Farahidi. Right? This is one of the important names to remember. Maybe strange to many people. Al-Khalil ibn Ahmad al-Farahidi. And when you have time, read his biography. Right? Me, personally, I haven't come across a mind like the mind of Khalil ibn Ahmad al-Farahidi. Right? With the exception of the prophets. But when it comes to where you see a person with that, what we call scientific mind, right? He was using science and concepts that were not used in his time. You know, the concept of programming, of developing all of the possible result of a situation and all of those things, he was using those things at his time. Al-Khalil ibn Ahmad al-Farahidi, and he was the teacher of Sibawayh. And Sibawayh is another name you got to know when it comes to Arabic language. Sibawayh. And Sibawayh, he was Persian. He studied under Khalil ibn Ahmad al-Farahidi. And he is the one, he has the oldest Arabic grammar book existing, known as the book, a complete with regards to all of the principles and so of the Arabic Arabic grammar. So Khalil ibn Ahmad al-Farahidi, he was from the main scholar of this time, where they develop all of the principles and so of the Arabic language and laid it down, and his student Sibawayh also, they laid out almost all of the foundation of the Arabic language. Rather, there wasn't any really addition after the book of Sibawayh. There was not really any addition after the book of Sibawayh with regards to all of the principles. I mean, the book of Sibawayh, everything it has in it. With regards to the grammar, with regards to sarf, with regards to how the Arabs used to speak, with regards to tajweed and everything, he compiled in that book. That is known as the book. That is the name. Al-Kitab, the book of Sibawayh. And during this phase is where you had the addition of sarf under the study of Arabic language. Normally you study grammar and you study sarf, morphology, right? During that time, they were studying it all under Arabic language. Sarf and grammar, they were all united in one studies. And also one of the things that this field is known for is debates between the Basra school of thought and the Kufa school of thought. There were a lot of debates. And then the third stage is where the Arabic language took its peak with regards to the general completion of the Arabic language, all of the terminologies of the Arabic language. And during this phase is where the scholars, they separate the study of Nahu and Sarf. They study the science of Nahu and Sarf was separated into different books, and different class and scholars, they will dedicate different studies for each field. It was not studied and merged into one like the previous field, and this happened in Basra and Kufa. And then there's a fourth stage, the stage of Baghdad, or the Baghdadi stage, or Marhalat al-Tarjih. And this stage is like the stage that came after the four madhahib. You know, you study fiqh, you have the four madhahib, and then after the four madhahib, you have scholars who look into these four madhahib, and they choose views from each madhahib which they see to be most correct. So that's really the Baghdadi scholars they were doing. They didn't come with anything new, really. They were just choosing which view from the two school of thoughts that they see to be more correct, or they incline towards. And you might have some scholars who incline more towards the Kufi school, the school of Kufa, and some more inclined towards the school of Basra. And these just for those who want to specialize in Arabic language, and so it is good to know a brief history on those things. So this, and in general, summary, so we have the three main stage: the stage of laying the foundation, which took place in Basra, the stage of development in Basra and Kufa, and the stage of completion in Kufa, Basra and Kufa also. And three names, remember three names: Abu al-Aswad al-Du'ali, who was with Ali radiallahu an, Al-Khalil ibn Ahmad al-Farahidi. He was the one who made a lot of completion with regards to the Arabic language, and he's the one who actually developed Arud that we were explaining before. He's the one who come about with this science, and Sibawayh, who actually completed the Arabic grammar in its general form. The next stage, they were just a brief touch-up on the Arabic language. That is the third stage, the stage of completion. Now, why is it we find Arabic grammar difficult? Many of you, maybe you're trying to study Arabic for years, right? And you still can't sit with one lecture and understand one lecture, right? And inshallah, if I forget, remind me to give a tip. Inshallah, if you follow this guideline, within a year, 2 years, you will be able to listen to an Arabic lecture and understand most of it, right? If I forget, remind me that tip, inshallah. So why is it we find the Arabic grammar to be difficult? In general, we find it to be difficult because we don't study it the same way we will study the grammar of our own language. When you go to school, and when is it you start to study English grammar? When your child is growing up and is now learning to talk, you're telling him, put the subject before the predicate and use the auxiliary verb and those things. You're telling him those things. You're not telling him none of those things, right? If it's plural, if it's singular, say is. If it's plural, say are. Right? If the noun is singular, use is. If the noun is plural, use are. You're not saying any of those things, right? And when is it? For example, you say Ahmad is going to the big masjid. Now, anyone who wants to express this, and any English-speaking person, he want Ahmad, you see Ahmad is going to the big masjid, he want to express that, he's able to say it. Ahmad is going to the big masjid. Right? Someone asks, where is Ahmad going? He's going to the big masjid. Someone who knows, who understands English, he understands. When you tell him, you ask me, where is Ahmad going? I say, Ahmad is going to the big masjid. You have no problem understanding it. Now, if I ask you, okay, which is the subject of the sentence and which is the predicate of the sentence? Right? People might be speaking English for 100 years without making a single grammatical mistake. You ask them a subject and predicate, they don't know what you're talking about. Point out the auxiliary verb from the sentence. Huh? What is the ruling concerning the adjective and the noun? You understand? You don't understand any of those things, but you don't have a problem expressing Ahmad is going to the masjid nor understanding Ahmad is going to the masjid. And that is why we're finding Arabic difficult. Because we jump the gun. The first step is to get a general understanding of the language. So now when you study grammar, you can relate to something. It's just to straighten out, and the main purpose of the grammar is to straighten out the tongue. Right? The main purpose of the Arabic grammar, as we mentioned, why they develop it. And that's why I will keep telling why they develop Arabic grammar. Not to teach it as a foreign language, yes. I'm not saying there is no benefit in studying grammar, but it's the harder way to go. You're going to learn, you're going to have to force things down your brain, and you're going to be tiring yourself to understand concepts because you can't relate to it. Right? And another example, let's use the next sentence we have there. We have akala, we have tamar, we have toir, we have aswad. Right? Now I want everyone to, even if you know the meaning of these words, imagine you don't know the meaning of these words. Right? Imagine you don't know the meaning of this. Put yourself in the shoe of someone who don't know the meaning of these words. And now you're joining an Arabic grammar class. So what are you going to learn? You're going to learn fa'il is marfu'. You're going to learn that the fa'il, and then if you're studying grammar through an Arabic source, they're not going to tell you what fa'il means. The fa'il is the fa'il. Right? The fa'il is the fa'il. What fa'il mean? Fa'il means doer. So now let's say, okay, you understand that fa'il means doer. So the doer takes dhamma. The object takes fatha, right? I know the more precise is to say marfu and mansub and so. We just want to get to a point. So the fa'il, the doer, the person who's doing the action, he takes dhamma. The person who the action fall upon, the object, is taking. Let's go back to this word. Now you're in Arabic grammar class, right? You are in an Arabic grammar class. The teacher tell you, fa'il is dhamma. Maf'ulun bihi, which is object, has fatha. And then he give you a sentence. Point out the fa'il and point out the object. Now you see this word here, this sentence. Akala, tamar, toir, aswad. Right? Generally, people are going to say what? They're going to say, akala, at-tayru, akala, at-tamru, at-tayra. Right? You're going to say the toir, the tamar eat the toir. Remember I said, imagine you don't know Arabic right now. You don't know these words, right? You're going to say, because there is a basic structure. You put the verb first, you put the doer first, then you put the object. Right? So now, let's go to the meaning now. Akala means eat, tamar means date, toir means bird, aswad means black. Right? Akala means eat. Tamar means dates that you eat. Toir means bird. Aswad means black. Right? Now, if you are trying to figure out who is the doer and who is the object, without knowing the meaning, you might end up saying that the date is the doer. Right? But if you know that akala means eat, tamar means date, toir means bird, aswad means black, right? Without knowing any grammar rule, you know that the bird ate the date. And in Arabic, the doer can come first, the doer can come last. So here, literally it means ate the date, the bird, the blackboard. Ate the date, the blackboard. So who ate what? The blackboard ate the date. You can also say akala tayru Al-aswadu at-tamra. So you can put the object, which is the tamar, before or after. You can know how much grammar you know. But if you hear a word, or you hear a sentence, or read a sentence, and you don't know what it means, right? You don't know the meaning of the words, you won't know which one to put fatha and which one to put dhamma. You understand? So the most important thing is to what? Is to build the vocabulary, to learn words. Just go across the sentence and memorize no words. Don't pay attention to grammar for the first year, at least the first year and a half. Don't pay attention to grammar until you can listen to a lecture and understand it. Remember, it's paying attention to grammar, focusing, learning 1, 2 grammar here and there. Yeah, there's no harm. But if you're going to dedicate yourself to grammar and you don't have a general understanding of the language when you hear it and read it, or at least when you hear it, you're going to fall into a lot of problems, and you're going to take longer learning grammar, and it's going to be difficult for you, and you might even give up, and you will never understand Arabic grammar. So just by knowing what these words mean, you're going to know who eat what, without even knowing. Now let's say you're reading a book, and the book has tashkil, vowels. The vowels can be wrong. The person who print make mistake. And they say, akala tamru at-tayra. Right? They can tashkil it, put the voweling like that. Akala tamru at-tayra. If you don't know the word, you're going to think that the tamar ate the toyer, the date ate the bird. But once you know the word, you know it is impossible for the date to eat the bird. You know it's a grammar mistake. And even if there's no vowel, and most of the books, they have no vowels on it, all you need to know is the vocabs, and you're going to understand. Now, yes, there are cases where you won't understand the sentence properly and truly without the Arabic grammar. But the vast majority of the general everyday usage and sentence and lectures and so on, you don't need to know the Arabic grammar to get into that. You have to know the Arabic grammar in order to have a perfect understanding of the language. Now, don't misunderstand, right? We are talking about the steps of learning Arabic properly. You have to know Arabic grammar if you want to know something properly. It's like studying medicine, right? The PhD part of your certificate is very important. You won't be able to practice, be a doctor without getting that PhD, but you can't jump past bachelor or master's. You understand? You can physically and literally jump past it. You're going to learn something, you're going to understand something, but you're going to be a lot of struggles. You're going to do a lot of catch-up. You got to use your brains more, right? So that is just a basic demonstration of the importance of what? Of focusing on the actual language practically. Just know the meaning of words. Now we have in this slide here, I give some examples of how, or this here is to demonstrate, inshallah ta'ala, more how knowing the words, the meaning of the words is going to help better. So in Arabic, for example, when you're studying grammar, you're going to study fa'il. Fa'il, maf'ulun bihi, maf'ulun fihi, maf'ulun ma'ahu, maf'ulun li ajli, and hal. You're going to study those things. The fa'il, the maf'ulun fihi, maf'ulun bihi. The maf'ulun ma'ahu is one word. Maf'ulun li ajlihi is another, one phrase, and then the hal. The fa'il takes dhamma. All of these things, all the rest takes fatha. We use basic terminology. More precise, they are mansub, fa'il, marfu. Right? You have students, they're going to graduate from university, and yet they won't master none of these. Confused. Because all of these things, you have to put fatha. Right? And if you give them a sentence, after 1-2 years of study in Arabic, graduating even, right? You give them a sentence and you ask them to tell me which is the maf'ulun bihi, which is the maf'ulun fihi, which is the maf'ulun ma'ahu, which is the maf'ulun li ajlihi, which is the hal. You ask them, all of these things originally takes fatha. They are mansub. Because all of them in mansub, they get confused. Now they see a word with a fatha, they're confused. Is it maf'ulun bihi? Is it maf'ulun fihi? Is it hal? Is it what? Right? Now let's look, let's look as if you understand the meaning of this word, how it's going to be a difference. Fa'il, we said, mean doer, but specifically refer to the doer when it comes after the verb. For example, we said Muhammad ja'a, ja'a Muhammad. Both is translated as Muhammad came. But when we say Muhammad ja'a, we mention the doer before the verb. When we say ja'a Muhammad, we mention the doer, the literal linguistic doer, after the verb. But in Arabic grammar, if it comes before the verb, we call it mubtada. If it comes after the verb, we call it fa'il. Right? Basic. We're using basic nahu right now, basic terminology. So we have the fa'il, literally also the fa'il. Fa'ala means to do something, the fa'il, the doer. So the word by itself literally means doer. Now let's say you're not studying grammar and for 2 years, a year and a half, you're just coming across lectures or passages and translating the words, or using with the guidance of a teacher, which is the best way to learn the language, and he's giving you the meaning of words and vocab, you're going to come across that fa'il means doer. So now when you're studying grammar and they use the terminology fa'il, you don't have any problem knowing what the terminology means. But if the terminology, now let's say you're studying grammar and I give you all of these terminology one time. Fa'il, maf'ulun bihi, maf'ulun fihi. You're going to forget which one means doer, which one means object, because all the terminology is totally strange. But a person who knows Arabic, he knows that fa'il literally means doer. Maf'ul literally means object. At the side, the right side, you see maf'ul literally means object. Fihi literally means in it. Bihi, upon it. Ma'ahu, with it. Lahu, for it. Hal, state. Now let's merge it with what's before, with the column on the left. So fa'il, doer, right? Maf'ul, we said the word literally means object. So the terminology of maf'ul fihi, fihi means in it, is where the thing, the objects fall in it. Right? What the object fall in. You do something upon somebody. Now what that action fall in, the time that it fall in. Maf'ulun bihi, upon it, what the object fall upon. Okay, so let me say, okay, I ate the bread dhuhr time, at dhuhr. I ate the bread at dhuhr. Who ate the bread? I. What is the maf'ulun bihi, the object, right, upon which the action fall is the bread, right? What is the maf'ul fihi? The place, the time, the place or time that the object fall in, that occurred in, dhuhr, right? So just by knowing the meaning, you don't need to burst your head to know what is what, right? But now what the Arabic grammar do, you know that, okay, if I want to say, I ate the bread, make the bread fatha. That is what they do to you. The grammar straighten you up now. You know, okay, I want to say, I ate the bread. I know what is the word for I know what the word for bread. I can say I, and I say bread, and I say ate. Now how to end it, that is what the grammar is for. Should I put fatha? Should I put dhamma? Should I put kasra? You understand? So the grammar is to straighten up. So if you do it after, it make it easy. Now let's take another example. Let's use the example that we have. So we have the verse إِذَا جَاءَ نَصْرُ اللَّهِ وَالْفَتْحِ, right? إِذَا جَاءَ نَصْرُ اللَّهِ وَالْفَتْحِ. We just when comes the help of Allah and the victory. I just translate it how it comes, the word by word as a verse to make it easy for understanding. So comes, we have the word comes, right? We have the word comes. When comes the help of Allah and the victory. So now if you want to know what is the fa'il, the doer, what is it that came? The help of Allah. What came? The help of Allah and the victory follows. But if you ask now what is the fa'il, the doer, but you don't know what fa'il means, and you don't know what this verse means, you won't be able to figure out who is fa'il. If you think ja'a means hit, right? You think nasara means, nasru means tree, right? You know when you're memorizing for force, you're mixing up obvious words. If you memorize it together especially. You're memorizing tree. Let's say the one day you're memorizing the word for tree is shajara, and on the same day you're memorizing the word for pen is qalam. If you don't keep revising, what is going to happen? 2-3 weeks after, you're going to figure out which one is tree and which one is qalam. And you might be speaking to an Arab, and you're telling him, I need a tree, and he can't figure out how you mix in tree and pen. You understand? Because you're memorizing the two together, so it's easy to mix up. So if you don't get the Arabic properly with regards to vocabs, you're going to fall into a lot of struggle understanding the grammar. The next sentence, you have, وَرَأَيْتَ النَّاسَ يَدْخُلُونَ فِي دِينِ اللَّهِ أَفْوَاجًا, and you see the people entering into the religion of Allah in crowds. Right? In crowds. Now if I ask you, and you see the people entering the religion of Allah in crowds, if I ask you, what is the maf'ulun bihi? Now bihi means fall upon it. So it is the thing that the verb, the action fall upon. What is the verb? See. Right? And you see. That is the verb. What is the thing that verb fall upon? What is it you see? What is it you land the action of seeing upon? The people, right? Now if I ask you what is the hal, what is the state? Now you know, kaifa haluk, how is your state? Right? You translate as how are you? The state meaning the state in which you see the action taking place, or the state in which you see the object taking place. It can be anyone, right? The context is going to tell you. So the state can be anyone. But then so which is the state? Is the state people? The people is not reflecting any state. The religion of Allah, is it reflecting any state? You see the people entering the religion of Allah. It's not reflecting state. It's reflecting what they're entering upon. In crowds, that is what is reflecting state. They're entering in the religion of Allah in crowds. You understand? So by knowing what it means, you don't have to burst your head to figure out which is the hal, which is the state. Just by knowing, okay, you see the people entering into the religion of Allah in crowds. So you know in crowds got to be the hal, because that's describing how you see them, or how the people entering into the religion of Allah. Sorry, how you see the people entering into the religion of Allah. You see them entering in state. Is describing the state of which that verb entering occurs. The verb entering occurs. The next verse, وَلَا تَقْتُلُوا أَوْلَادَكُمْ خَشْيَةَ إِمْلَاقٍ, and do not kill your children for fear of poverty. Now look at the Arabic. وَلَا تَقْتُلُوا, do not kill, أَوْلَادَكُمْ, your children. خَشْيَةَ means fear. Imlaq, poverty. Now where is the word for? The word for is not in there. Right? But you see we have something called lahu. Maf'ulun lahu. What is the meaning of maf'ulun lahu or maf'ulun li ajlihi? I made a mistake there on the slide. Right? Maf'ul li ajlihi is actually maf'ulun lahu. It's two words for the same thing. Lahu means for it. Li ajlihi means because of it, for it. It's the same thing. So it's two terminology for the same thing. I should have used the same terminology in both cases. So we said maf'ulun lahu is the verb showing, the word showing why you did something. For what reason? For what reason you do something. Maf'ulun lahu, for it, or li ajlihi, when you say li ajli, something for the sake of something. Right? So the maf'ulun lahu shows you the reason why you're doing something. And we say all of these are fatha. Right? So we have the word there, khashyata. Now you are someone who is now learning Arabic language. If you give them the sentence and tell them what is khashyata, they might think it is maf'ulun bihi. But maf'ulun bihi is what? Object. Right? Allah says, do not kill your children. Do not kill your children. So the children there is the maf'ulun bihi. Object. That is the thing you're not to kill. That is the action. The thing where the action is falling upon. Now what is khashyata showing us? It's explaining why you should not kill. So it's going to be maf'ulun lahu or maf'ulun li ajlihi. So you see why just knowing the meaning of the words, it make it easy for you to differentiate what is what. The last example we have, tasla naran hamiya, right? Burning in a scorching fire. Now note, the verse only have burning and scorching fire. There is no in a. But what is scorching fire showing? It's showing where you are burning. If you say now, it is maf'ulun bihi, his object, it means that you are burning the scorching fire. But you're not burning the scorching fire. They are burning the faces in Surah Ghashiyah. It means that their faces will be burning what? In the scorching fire. So just knowing the word scorching fire, you know that it is not object. It is what? It is the place where the action is taking place. It's maf'ulun fihi. The place in which the action is taking place. Now this might be for those who are totally khalil bal, like no previous background, it might be a little confusing. Those of you who might be trying to understand Arabic for some time, you might be able to more relate to this. And we have some examples of books to study the Arabic language. From amongst the most famous one is the Ajrumiyah, one of the most famous one around us here, right? A lot of masajid, they teach Al-Ajrumiyah. And then, well, all of these books is to study Arabic when you know Arabic. None of these books is to study Arabic before knowing Arabic. You're going to make life complicated for yourself. All of these books, the scholars, they write them for Arabs to straighten their language, right? And we're translating it and teaching it to non-Arabs to learn Arabic. That's why we're running everyone away from the Arabic language, right? And then you have Sharh Ajrumiyah, explanation of Ajrumiyah. You have the Sharh of Sheikh Uthaymeen. It's a nice simple explanation for those who you can relate to the Arabic language, right? You read and you know what you're reading. You listen and you can hear. And then from amongst the most famous is Ibn Aqil, the Sharh of Ibn Aqil for the Alfi ibn Malik. Alfi ibn Malik is 1,000 lines of poetry. Alfi ibn Malik. Alfi ibn Malik is what? 1,000 lines of poetry written by the scholar Ibn Malik. And their explanation for that 1,000 line of poetry, from amongst the most famous explanation, is Sharh ibn Aqil. And we have it here. These two here is one example. Sharh ibn Aqil, these two volumes, is the explanation for Alfiya ibn Malik. And that is maybe the most famous grammarian is Ibn Malik, without any comparison. Almost everyone who study Arabic grammar in the Arabic language, you know about Alfiya ibn Malik. A lot of people, they know about Ajrumiyah, but you don't know who wrote Ajrumiyah, right? What's the name of the one who wrote Ajrumiyah? But everyone, they know about Alfiya ibn Malik, and the most famous explanation is the explanation of Ibn Aqil. Now, this book here that we have here, what is it? Sharh al-Kafiya Shafiyah. This here is by Ibn Malik also, right? This is about 3,000 lines of poetry of with regards to the Arabic grammar. This here, Sharh al-Kafiya Shafiyah. It's about 3,000 lines of poetry. We have the Sharh al-Kafiya Shafiyah. Now this is not as famous, but those who, if you study Alfi ibn Malik a few times, you can read through this. Sharh al-Kafiya Shafiyah. You can read through it to get some more insight in the Arabic language. It's not recommended to memorize it. About 3,000 lines of poetry. And Ibn Malik, he summarized this into the 1,000 line of poetry. The Alfiya means alf. He summarized this here. This is the original. The 3,000 lines, roughly 2,900 and something, roughly 3,000 lines of poetry. He summarized it into the 1,000 lines of poetry. And another example, another famous Arabic book is Awdah al-Masalik. Now, Awdah al-Masalik by Ibn Hisham, he explained Alfiya ibn Malik in a more systematic way without relying on the structure of the Alfiya. You know, when you explain a book, you can explain it generally, or you can explain it line by line. Like this line means this line means this, and the ruling that comes under the line. But Ibn Hisham, he explained it and he structured it more systematically. And this is one of the most famous also, Awdah al-Masalik. All of these is to study after after knowing the Arabic language. Don't go into them. If you want to know when I should start, open the middle of the book, right? And read 2-3 pages. And if you can understand the literal meaning of what he's saying, then it's time, then you can start. But if you open the book and you don't know half of the words on the page, there's no use starting it. And that is why Arabic grammar is so complicated for many people. Because you got to do double thing. You got to try to figure out what he's saying, and then you got to try understanding the concept. Okay, the next science, inshallah ta'ala, we'll go through briefly is ilm as-sarf, the ilm of morphology. And we said that this science is study the structure of the Arabic language. And it generally deals with those words that are changeable. Those words that are changeable. You call them the ism al-mutamakkin or al-fi'l al-mutasarrif. Those words, nouns and verbs that are changeable. What is meant by changeable? Meaning it goes through different phases. It can go through different phases. For example, you have the word ha'ula. The word ha'ula is fixed. You can't move it. You can't do anything to it. You can't add to it. You can't take out from it. But you have the word kataba, means he wrote. You can add to it. You can make it katib, the scribe. Right? You can say yaktubun, they are writing. Kuttab, scribes. Maktub, the thing that has been written. Kitaba, the writing. Right? You can interfere with the word. You can move it. It's changeable. So this science here, it only deals with what is changeable. It only deals with what is changeable. And also when they are studying the science, they study the forms of each word. The forms of the word, and the forms of the word is normally scaled. For example, we have that word kataba, right? You will study, this word kataba means he wrote. It is a past tense verb. And each state of the verb, they give it a scale. They give it a scale. They use fa, ain, and lam to scale the word, right? To measure the word. So this word kataba, the scale of it is fa'ala. The scale of it is what? Fa'ala. We have some example here to show you. We have khalaqa, means he created. Khaliq is the what? The creator. Makhluk is what? The creation. So we see the word khalaqa is changeable, right? You can change it. Khalaqa, he creates. Khaliq, creator. Makhluk, creation. So now they will scale these 3 different type of words. So for example, the word khalaqa is on the scale fa'ala, right? You have the kha, fa representing the kha, and you put back the vowel as it is. The ain representing the lam, and the lam representing the qaf, right? We miss a stroke there. The lam representing the qaf. Now they use fa, ain, and lam when they are scaling, and every word, generally, all of the Arabic words, the vast majority of Arabic words, it goes back to a 3-letter root. So the fa, the ain, and the lam will represent the roots. Any additional letter to that root, you just put it back in the scale as it is, as we will see. And we will mention a benefit of these scales. So the knowledge of sarf, you're studying the scale. When it comes to fiqhul lugha, the understanding of lugha, you're going to study now the meaning of these scales. But you're going to automatically do the 2 at the same time, most of the time. So for example, you have the next word mean khaliq, creator. So we said, if you want to know the scale of the word khaliq, so we put the fa to represent the first root letter, which is what? The kha. We said any additional letter, put it back at it as it is. What is the additional letter in this case? The alif. Because khalaqa is the root. It doesn't have any alif, so you put the alif back as it is. The ain representing the lam, and the lam representing the qaf. So the word khaliq is on the scale what? Fa'il. The word khaliq is on the scale fa'il. So in other words, the past tense verb is on the scale fa'ala. The doer is on the scale fa'il. The doer of these 3-letter verbs is on the scale fa'il. And then you have the object now, the scale of the object. So we said any extra letter. The meme is not in khalaqa. There's no meme in khalaqa. So you put back the meme with the fatha. The kha representing, the fa representing the kha. The ain representing the lam. The waw is not in the original letter, so you put it back as it is. And then the lam representing the qaf. So the word makhluk is on the scale what? Maf'ul. So in other words, the three-letter verb is on the scale fa'ala. The doer of that verb is on the scale fa'il, and the object of that word is on the scale maf'ul. Now, you have past tense, doer, object. Now let's take a practical benefit of this. Right? A practical benefit of this. And this is just a gist. Just to expose to this science. Just an exposure to this science. Not meant, this science, as you say, the class is not meant to study Arabic as a language. So we have the word sa'ala, sa'ilun bi'adhabin waqi'. Right? We're just focusing on sa'ala sa'ilun. Sa'ala sa'ilun. Right? Sa'ala, ask. Imagine you don't know what is sa'il. About a torment that is coming. Ask, sa'ala, we know sa'ala means ask. Right? Who or what is asked? What is the next word? We don't know. Right? But look at the next word. You know the next word, if we remember we said, fa'il is doer. You see the next word shaped like fa'il? Right? The next word shaped like what? Like fa'il. And you notice the root word is the same. You have the sin from sa'ala, you have the hamza, il, right? Fa'il, and you have the lam. So you see, and then you have the additional alif there, sa'il. So if we know sa'ala means ask, past tense, and we know that fa'il is the scale of the doer, then sa'il is the doer of sa'ala. So what is the meaning of sa'il? Asker, or a questioner, right? In English, you can't really follow the same words all the time. For example, you have in English, you have cook. The person who cook you something, you call him cook, you call him chef. But in Arabic, you can maintain it. Cook, cooker, cooked, right? You can maintain it in the Arabic language. So sometimes with the English, to make it sound nice, you gotta use a different word. So asker. So in other words, an asker, ask about a punishment about to befall. And this is one of the interpretation of the verse. There's other interpretation of the verse, and that is not our topic here. The next example, right? The one that doesn't have, that has a question mark, if you know it, imagine you don't know it. So to understand the concept. So we have min sharri hasidin idha hasad, right? In Surah Falaq, from the evil of hasid, evil envier, from the evil of the envier when something. Right? So hasid we know means envier. And it's on what scale? Fa'il, doer. And we notice the last word is the same root letter, hasada. And that is on the scale, what scale? The scale of the past tense verb. So if we bring it back now, hasada gonna be what? The verb for hasid. Hasada is gonna be what? The verb for hasid. Because hasid means envier. And hasada is on the scale of the past tense verb. Right? Hasada, the same root letter, the same root words is on the scale of the past tense verb. So if we know hasid, we're going to say hasada means to envy. So you're seeking refuge from the evil of the envier when he envies. And this is just one benefit. There are many benefits of knowing sarf and how it works. From amongst the benefit of knowing sarf, you know the meaning of different shape of the words, right? Because as I say, sarf and fiqhul lugha, it goes, you study the two hand in hand. For example, you have the word alima, means what? Alima means to know. And then another form of the word is allama. So alima on the scale fa'ala. Allama is on the scale fa'ala. Right? And one of the meaning of this scale, fa'ala, any word you see on the scale fa'ala, is you are making someone do the fa'ala form of the word. One of the meaning of the scale fa'ala is you are making someone do the fa'ala form of the word. So we have the verb fa'ala means to do. Alima means to know. So that is on the scale fa'ala. Alima, more specifically on the scale fa'ila. Alima on the scale fa'ila. Alima fa'ila. Now fa'ala, right, going to make the word become allama. And we say one of the meaning of this scale is you're making someone do the fa'ila scale or the fa'ala scale. So when you make somebody know, what are you doing to them? You teach them. You make them know, you teach them. So allama means what? To teach. Allama means to teach. Another example, jalasa means to sit on the scale fa'ala. Now when you jalasa somebody, you make them sit. Right? Another structure that has this meaning is af'ala, ajlasa. You ajlasahu, you make him jalasa. So by studying the scale, you know the meaning of the different forms, and you understand the language from the language. Right? You know, in the beginning stage, you understand it through translation. But with the sarf, it's going to help you understand the language through the language, and you enjoy the beauty of the language. Right? Alima, you're going to say alima means he know, allama means he learn. Right? It's two different words in English. And then briefly about balagha before we end, inshallah ta'ala. We say balagha in this science, in this field of study, the field of balagha, you deal with the art of effectiveness or persuasive speaking and writing by making use of sentence structures, figure of speech, and other composition techniques. So this here, you know how to speak and everything, right? You just want to make use of figure of speech. You want to make your sentence accurate. We started out, we gave the example before, Ja'a Muhammad and Muhammad Ja'a. Right? Ja'a Muhammad and Muhammad Ja'a. Let me use another example. Akala Muhammad al-khubz, Muhammad akala al-khubz. Right? Both we're going to translate as Muhammad ate the bread. One we put the verb first, the second one we put the verb secondly. Now if you want to say Muhammad ate the bread, anyone you use, you are grammatically correct. No one can object to you. Now this balagha here, if you want to be more eloquent and use the precise expression for the precise time and place, you got to know balagha. So now let's say that you are dealing with bread, and the bread, someone ate the bread. Right? Someone ate the bread. Right? You want to know what? You want to know who ate. You want to know, you're concerned about the eating of the bread. You're not really concerned about the person. So in that case, you're going to put the eating first. You're going to say, Akala Muhammad al-Khubz. Or sorry, that structure is not precise. We have a bread being eaten. A bread that has been eaten. Or you see the bread and a piece missing from it. Let's use it like that. It's going to be easier. You see a bread, a piece that has been eaten from the bread. You don't know what happened to the bread. Right? In the first, you don't know what happened to the bread. Right? You're not care about individuals. You want to know what happened to the bread. So you're going to say, Akala Muhammad al-Khubz. Ate Muhammad the bread. In other words, Muhammad ate the bread, but you're going to say ate first. Because you want to know what? What happened to the bread. Now you know what happened to the bread. The bread has been eaten. You want to know who ate the bread? You're going to say Muhammad akal al-khubz. Understand the difference? One, you don't know what happened to the bread. It could be a rat bite it. The person who baked it didn't break it properly. You want to know what happened to the bread? You put ate. Because their attention is on what happened to the bread. So you put that first. The second one, you know that the bread has been eaten. You want to know who ate the bread. So the attention is on the person. You put the person first. Now, if you answer the question anyhow, you're correct. You're grammatically correct. But if you want to be precise, and when you study tafsir now, and this is what also amazed the Arabs with the Quran. In a lot of places in the Quran, you see one spot, Allah mentioned this word first, the next spot he mentioned this word first. Naf' wa dar. La yanfa' qul la amliku li nafsi naf'an wa la darra. Right? Ya'buduna min dunillahi ma la yamliku lahum naf'a wa la darra. Some spot, darra wa la naf'a. Right? Say, I do not have any harm and benefit for myself. In other spot, I do not have any benefit and harm for myself. Right? It got to do with what the attention is. Is the context a context of harm? Is the context a context of benefit? For example, when you look in the story of Bani Israel, a lot you see benefit come first. Why? If you study, when you look at the character of Bani Israel, they are pushed by more what? By fear of harm. They are pushed more by fear of harm. That's why Pharaoh was able to punish them. They are always in this fear of harm, more than their hope for benefit. When Allah talk about the day of judgment, and the Prophet ﷺ having no benefit and harm, he say benefit than harm. On the day of judgment, you want what first? You are more concerned of being benefited, right? You want the benefit more than you want the harm. You don't want the harm on the day of judgment. Quick example of some of the arts of balagha are the art of preceding and delaying. This is which you put, whether you put the verb first or you put the verb second. How much time to Maghrib? 6? Okay. All right, inshallah. 3 minutes, inshallah. Or 4 minutes. So, Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'in compared to na'buduka wa nasta'inuk, right? Normally you translate, you alone we worship, you alone we ask for help. Right? Another way to say it, out of the Quran, you can say to mean you we worship and you we ask for help can be na'buduka wa nasta'inuk. Na'buduk, we worship you, nasta'inuk, we ask for help. But putting the object first, meaning the thing that you are worshiping, when you say, you we worship, meaning we do not worship anything but you. But if I say, I worship you, doesn't negate I do not worship other than you. So you see where the alone come from? Just by putting it first. When you say, I worship you, does not negate I don't worship other than you. Right? I love you, does not negate I don't love anyone other than you. Right? Your wife going to use balagha on you tonight. Say, you I love. You're going to see. So I love you does not negate I do not love other than you. But when I say you I love, meaning what? You alone I love. The hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, Ikhwanukum khawalukum. Khawal means servants. The Prophet ﷺ, he is telling the companions to treat your servants good and that they are your brothers. So generally he's supposed to say, your servants are your brothers. Right? Because he's speaking about the servants, treating the servants good, and you want to say, your servants are your brothers. But no, the Prophet ﷺ, he said, Ikhwanukum khawalukum. He say, your brothers, your servant. But the meaning is, your servant are your brothers. Why he say Ikhwan? Because to put your attention to the ukhuwa, the brotherhood. Right? Not the servitude, the brotherhood. Compared to khawalukum, Ikhwanukum. Another example, another science or technique of balagha is the art of brevity and detailing, and also the art of metaphor. I mentioned these three because the verse that we're going to deal with all three of it. Being brief or being detailed, and also using metaphors. And these are all things that beautify the speech. Now quickly, let's go through the verse quickly. We're not going to go through the Arabic. In the story of Yusuf, when they went and then Yusuf, he took captured Benjamin as captive with the trick that he used. The big brother, he tell the rest of them, he said, return to your father and say, oh our father, your son has committed theft, and we testify only to what we know. Now note who is speaking. Who is speaking? The big brother is speaking. The big brother, he said, return to your father. He's telling the rest of the brothers, go back to your father and say, oh, our father, your son has committed theft. We testify only to what we know, and we could not guard against the unseen, right? We could not prevent anything that we didn't know that is going to happen. As we know, the father, he took a covenant that they're going to bring back Benjamin, right? The next verse say, ask the land where we were and the caravan we are traveling with, and indeed we are telling the truth. This second verse here, who is speaking? The brothers are speaking to the father. The big brother say, go to your father and tell him that your son has committed theft. Right? And the second verse say, your father, the second verse saying, ask the land where we were and the caravan we are traveling with. A lot of things missing there. What is missing? The complete story will be, the big brother told them to go to your father and tell him he committed theft. And when they went to their father, they said to him that your son has committed theft. Ask the caravan and ask those whom we have traveled. Right? We call it summarize, being brief and still expressing is from the beauty. And no, they say ask what? Ask the caravan and ask the land. You don't ask the caravan, you ask the people. All of those are techniques in balagha. the use of emphasis, and this is, we will end with this inshallah ta'ala. From amongst the technique of balagha is when to use emphasis. You know, you say, inna, verily, innani tabib, verily I am a doctor. Compared to say, I am a doctor. Now, one of the instances when you use, now if you are telling, you want to tell somebody, I am a doctor, right? If you say, I am a doctor, you say, verily I am a doctor, you're grammatically correct. They can't object to you. Now, balagha is going to teach you when to say what. Balagha is going to what? Teach you when it's best to say what. Now, if you're speaking to somebody mutually, they don't know anything about you, they don't have any objection to what you're saying, you say, I am a doctor. Right? There's no need. But now if that person is objecting to you, you're not a doctor. He said, then you're going to come with emphasis. Verily I am a doctor. Right? You're going to say what? Verily I am a doctor. Look at the verse in Surah Yasin, and you can go back to it and ponder it, verse 13 to 15. Allah sent the messengers to them, right? To the people of the village, and then He strengthened them with two more messengers. He sent a messenger to the people of the village, and He strengthened them with two more messengers, and they said, Inna ilaykum mursalun. They said, indeed, we are messengers to you. What the people they said? They object. They object to them, and they said, you are nothing but men. And how did they respond? They respond by saying, قَالُوا رَبُّنَا يَعْلَمُ إِنَّا إِلَيْكُمْ لَمُرْسَلُونَ. After they object, they come with more emphasis. One, they say, رَبُّنَا يَعْلَمُ, our Lord know. And this is in Arabic by saying, Wallahi. It's like you saying, Wallahi. And the لَمُرْسَلُونَ is another emphasis. Indeed, your Lord knows, verily, truly, you add more emphasis to the sentence. And inshallah ta'ala, we will end with this. When the tip I said, to understand the language. Many of you struggling with the Arabic language, the tip is within what I mentioned before. For the first year, 2 years, just focus listening to Arabic. Don't read any book. No, reading is a hard thing to do. Just listen to Arabic a lot and memorize a vocab every day. Memorize 1 to 2 vocabs, strong. So that at the end of the month, 1 to 2 vocab, 30 to 60 vocabularies. Just by doing 1 or 2 properly, memorize it and keep listening to lecture even if you don't understand anything. Keep listening to lecture, and the best thing, memorize vocabs that are most likely in the context of the lecture. And inshallah, do that for like 1 year, 2 years, and you're going to see a difference. Don't read any book, don't study any grammar, and don't forget to register inshallah ta'ala. Register inshallah ta'ala so you can get the notes, and we apologize for the rush. And also we apologize for the little technical delay we had in the beginning, a 5 minutes delay that we had in the beginning. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive us our sins and our negligence, our shortcomings, and to pardon us for what may be said during this entire program from any of the speakers that might not be correct or upright. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to benefit us from what He has taught us and to increase us in knowledge. هذا وصلى الله على نبينا محمد وسلم والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله